we'll be talking today about the momentous events of the last week in Palestine.
Just before we start, we also wanted to give a shout out and show our complete love and solidarity with Ali Abu Nima, who was held captive in Switzerland almost twice. So the first time at the airport, he was detained briefly for a couple of hours. And a few days later, when he was about to enter an event that he was supposed to speak at, Swiss police took him into an unmarked van and held him captive for 2 days. Ali Abu Nima has showed great inspiring strength by refusing all meals and food and drinks that were offered to him, only lived off of water for 2 days in order to denounce the censorship and oppression to journalism and people who've shown solidarity with Palestinians from the Swiss police. Switzerland is seen as this democratic space. It's neutral, and it's put on a pedestal of being a place of human rights. Yet we know that human rights don't apply to everyone, especially not people who fight against Western imperialism and genocide. Right? Let's leave it at that. So all of our thoughts are with Ali Abu Nima. He's inspired definitely me to enter this field of journalism. He's pretty much my strongest source when it comes to reading about Palestine. He published the Lobby USA documentary when Al Jazeera was too scared to publish it. So truly a respected figure in the world of Palestine. So yes, all of our love and support to Ali Abu Nima, and may he keep carrying on the fight and inspiring more of us to take a stand on Palestine. Dimitri, did I forget anything?
Just for those who don't know the name, I imagine most of our audience will, but Ali is the founder and editor-in-chief of Electronic Intifada, an online source of information on the Palestinian struggle. He's based in the United States. He's been the editor-in-chief of Electronic Intifada for as long as I can remember, and I've interviewed him a couple of times on this program. And as I've said before, I think that Ali and his team, it's not just Ali, he has an extraordinary group of people around him, like Nora Barrows-Friedman and John Elmer and Asa Winstanley, and he has people on the ground in Palestine. I think that they do, no one does finer reporting on the subject of the Palestinian struggle than Electronic Intifada, and I think that's why he's been targeted. This is not the first time he's been targeted. He was targeted also by the German government, effectively barred from speaking there because he's such a powerful and compelling voice, and everything that he says is amply supported by carefully assembled evidence. They're very careful at Electronic Intifada. They do their homework, and I think that this is why we are seeing attempts to silence him and his team. And by the way, the British government went after one of his team members, Asa Winstanley, a couple of months ago. I believe they raided his home, if I recall correctly, Rami, under this draconian law, the Terrorism Act. He wasn't imprisoned or charged with anything, but they're clearly Western governments, European governments, are going after Electronic Intifada in any way they can to try to silence them. But we're very gratified that he's been freed. And we will continue to support in any way we can their extraordinary work.
Now, Dimitri, this week I happened to be, just before arriving in Gothenburg earlier yesterday, I was in Belgium where there was the National March of Solidarity with Palestine. It was attended by maybe around 50,000 people or so. I joined the Sami Doon Brigade or contingent of the protest. And there were around 200 people or so over there. Sami Doon has received lots of repression in Belgium as well. Dimitri, I feel like that's one of the subjects we speak the most on our live stream these days, is covering all the cases of journalistic mistreatment happening in the West. So I had the pleasure of meeting Mohammed Khatib and Abdullah from Samidoun, who are basically under surveillance by the Belgian state, who are restricting their right to movement. They're also banned from even entering Switzerland, the Netherlands, and possibly France. So I'm hoping to publish a report on that as well. I'm not as quick as you are, Dimitri, at publishing, but I'll get there. And Dimitri, where have you been lately? What have you done this past week?
Well, I have a humble abode in outside of Kalamata up in the mountain. So I spend as much time there as I can. I'm based in Montreal, but that's an important base for me as well, Kalamata. So that's where I've been the last few days. I was reopening my my home for the winter. And as I said, I don't plan to spend the next 2 months entirely in Kalamata because I really would like to get to West Asia. If we can't get into Gaza, Rami, I will do what I can, and hopefully you'll be able to join me to get into South Lebanon again, and perhaps other areas of the region with these fast-moving and historic developments that are happening every day.
Now, Dimitri, you also published a report with Alon Mizrahi. I believe that was after our last live stream.
Yes.
And was there another on? I believe tomorrow you might be publishing something with Laith. Okay, so maybe we could just start. Yeah, go on, Dimitri.
Yeah, so just people should check out the Alon Mizrahi is an author and activist, an Arab Jewish author and activist who left Israel because of the genocide, and I interviewed him for about an hour, and he talked about his evolution from Zionist to anti-Zionist, and that discussion has gotten a very positive reaction. The comments on the video have been wonderful. A lot of admiration for Alon and his humanity and his intellectual integrity. But yeah, we'll be doing interviews this week with Laith Marouf. Also, we'll have Jose Luis Granados Sella. We've had him on before to talk about all of these tariff threats against Latin America, and now people being deported directly to Latin American companies by the Trump administration. And then we're going to have a new guest by the name of Alex Crenier. I'll be interviewing him on Friday to talk about he's comes from the investment world, but has really keen insights into geopolitics. So we have a busy week ahead of us.
So, Dimitri, I think, we could just start by talking about the recent ceasefire. We spoke a lot about this in our previous live stream, but just to revisit this, the ceasefire agreement was divided into 3 phases. It took effect on January 19th, 2025. And in the first phase, it consisted of releasing the civilian, what Israel call hostages, right? The civilian hostages, as they call, in exchange for our own Palestinian held in captivity as well. So the first stage consisted, I believe, of the female civilians. That was the exchange that happened last week. In exchange, I believe we received 90 Palestinian female civilians as well. And then yesterday, the authority in Gaza was able to exchange 1 prisoner in order to open up Netzarim corridor to let the Palestinians enter the northern part of Gaza. And there were 4 female soldiers as well that were exchanged on Sunday, which I believe was for around 200 more Palestinians. Mm-hmm. So the first phase, once all of the so-called civilian prisoners are exchanged, it will bring us closer to the second stage of the ceasefire, which will now be the male soldiers that will then be exchanged for more Palestinians, of course. And then the third phase would be related to the reconstruction plan and what Israel calls the future of Gaza. Now, there's no guarantee that the first phase will actually be implemented or completed, and even less so for the second and third phase. So in short summary, that's what's detailed as being the 3 stages of the ceasefire. Now,
one detail we should add, Rami, is on the 16th day, which I think is going to be in a few days' time, they're supposed to commence negotiations about the second phase. So I think we'll pretty quickly form a view get some information about what the prospects are for the second phase actually going into effect. But we'll get into this some more during our discussion. If its government wants to see all of these prisoners of war, these soldiers, male and female, who are in the custody of Hamas released, they are going to have to see the second phase through to completion. And I think right now there's immense pressure. There has been considerable pressure, but now the pressure probably is higher than it's ever been within Israel for the government to ensure the release of all hostages, what they call hostages. The soldiers, of course, are not hostages. They're prisoners of war.
So, Dimitri, do you want to start talking about the Palestinians being able to return to the north?
Well, why don't we go with the prisoner swap first, Rami? So, as Rami mentioned, this past weekend, 4 female soldiers were freed by Hamas, and I think we should start by sharing with our audience a video, which I understand was produced by Hamas, of this ceremony. It was quite ceremonial, and then we'll comment upon it. But why don't we pull that up first? Video 1, Rami, and
السلام عليكم مرحبا. شكرا لكتاب القسام على كل المعاملة الكويسة. شكرا للأكل والشرب والملابس. شكرا للشباب اللي كانوا يحفظوا علينا ودير بالو علينا من كاسف. وإن شاء الله يكون الكل يوم سعيد وأحسن يوم وكلنا نكون بخير. يوم 25/1/25.
So these are the 4 female soldiers who were released. I believe, were they speaking Arabic, Rami? I believe they were.
Dimitri, they were speaking a better Arabic than I can.
Wow. Quite interesting. Yeah, let's continue. So here they are being given gifts. We can't see who's giving the gifts, but I believe that's probably one of the soldiers, the Hamas fighters. So I just want to draw your attention. I'll comment upon this when the video is finished, but look at all of these fighters in uniform. The number of them is quite striking. Please go ahead, Rami. Now they're going to go up on the stage and they have to sign some documentation. You can stop right there. Sorry. Now, if you look closely, everybody, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that there is a banner that has been erected on the podium behind the desk where everyone's going to sit down to sign the paperwork. I think those are officials of the Red Cross who are, also signing the paperwork. And it's written, there's language in both English and Arabic. And at the top, it says, Palestine, the victory of the oppressed people versus the Nazi Zionism. And then underneath it says, again in English, Gaza is the graveyard of the criminal Zionists. Now watch what happens. Here are the soldiers, the Israeli soldiers in uniform. Those are Israeli military uniforms. pause it there. Now, we'll come back to this, but this is being watched, these images, by Israelis. So you have 4 Israeli soldiers who appear to be in good health. The Times of Israel commented that those were the words the Times of Israel used when it described this scene, that they appeared to be in good health, smiling and waving. And they're doing that in front of a banner which refers to Zionism as a Nazi ideology and Gaza as the graveyard of the Zionists. It's really an extraordinary scene, something I think few, if any of us anticipated. Please go ahead, Rami.
Dimitri, just a quick comment, because you mentioned they're in uniform. This is, I believe, under the conventions of war, right? Soldiers held in captivity have the right to stay in military uniform. And this is an acknowledgement that the resistance in Gaza is actually abiding by their obligations as people that are keeping prisoners of war under their control. Do you have any comments on that, Dimitri?
No, I think that's a good point. It's a good point.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Thank you, Rami. Now, we were told that Hamas was largely destroyed. They didn't claim that it was completely destroyed, but largely destroyed. You saw there, certainly dozens, if not hundreds, of Hamas fighters in uniform, looking quite professional in their uniform. And by the way, a number of them, according to military experts, appeared to be carrying the latest Israeli automatic weapons, the Tavor rifles. Where they got them is an interesting question. They might have seized them on October 7th, or they might have seized them from soldiers in the subsequent combat that occurred inside the Gaza Strip. But one cannot watch this video and come away with the impression that Hamas is destroyed or that it isn't in control of the Gaza Strip. This certainly very powerfully conveys the impression that it remains a cohesive, disciplined military force, and that it is in control of the Strip. Now, I'm giving you my immediate reaction, but I think even more instructive is the reaction to this development, or these developments, of somebody by the name of Daniel Levy. And Daniel Levy is a British Israeli analyst and former advisor to the Israeli government, an eloquent, knowledgeable man, an expert in West Asian affairs, who has been outspoken in his criticism of the Israeli government's conduct over the past several years, particularly during the genocide. And he was interviewed on Middle East Eye. And we're going to show you a clip from his interview in a moment, but just so you understand, what he's commenting on in this clip is the impact of the release of the first 3 captives by Hamas. So this was, the commentary about to see were before what you just saw, which is the second swap involving 4 female Israeli soldiers. So why don't we play video 2?
Bring this all to the
of our audience.
Israelis see those images. I think it's really hard, by the way, for people to wrap their heads around the extent to which those Israelis who have been held in Gaza all this time have kind of taken up residence in the minds of so much of the Israeli population. This has been, it's been so relentless. The stories of the families, those who've gone out to protest, those who haven't, those who've been very prevalent in the media. So one cannot underestimate the impact on the Israeli public psyche of the release, the initial 3 who were released. And of course, everyone therefore saw those images. They saw the images of the Al-Qassam brigades escorting the three. They've been told Al-Qassam defeated. They've been told the public has turned against them. They've been told so many things. And then they saw those images. Now, in this kind of a struggle between, where there's such asymmetry, right? Between an occupying army, armed and aided by the most powerful military in the world, the US, a nuclear-armed state, Israel. In a struggle between that and a resistance movement, we were told, the problem with the total victory narrative is all it would take is one guy with just an arm remaining to raise two fingers in victory, and the Israeli we didn't see one guy with two fingers on an arm remaining. We saw a very powerful display, and Israelis saw that.
Indeed, it was a very powerful display, and that was just the first three. I would be interested to know what Daniel Levy's thoughts are after the second powerful display, which was even more, I think, striking, the one that you just saw. So the impact of this on, as Daniel Levy put it, the Israeli psyche, I think cannot be overstated. There were already, before the prisoner swaps, you could find in the Israeli press, particularly the Hebrew language Israeli press, not so much the English language Israeli press, comments about how the ceasefire constituted a defeat and Israel had been defeated for the first time in its history. With these two swaps and what people saw within Israel, there has to be an overwhelming sentiment, I would imagine, really of military shame. I mean, with all of the weapons at its disposal and all of the destruction that Israel, backed by the full force and fury of the United States, visited upon the Gaza Strip, for the resistance groups to be in this good a condition and to have this level of control and this level of discipline is mind-blowing. It's just simply mind-blowing. Whatever you may think of Hamas, I'm going to say this again. I've said it before. I think what we have witnessed over the past 15 months in all of Palestine, not just in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, is the greatest act of collective resistance of our lifetimes, and one of the greatest acts of collective resistance in human history. I bow at the feet of the Palestinian people. Not just militants. This is also very much a civilian resistance. Every person in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank who has survived this reign of terror, these monstrosities, these Western-backed crimes against humanity every single day, we should bow at their feet in honor of their dignity, their steadfastness, and their just immense courage. So Rami, I'm curious what you felt as a Palestinian when you saw these images of these prisoner swaps.
Well, there's two kinds of reactions that we're seeing, right? So the first one is seeing these 4 Israeli soldiers coming out of their imprisonment, smiling, not necessarily fearing their in some way their prison guards, right? The people that were holding them prisoners. And on the other hand, you see the Palestinians, who are, many of them, exiled from even coming to to go back to their families in the West Bank or Gaza, who are now thrown into exile into Egypt and other Arab countries that we're still not very aware of where they're going to be. People are saying Tunisia, Algeria, and beyond. So when I see this as a Palestinian, Bisan Wizard on Instagram had an amazing analysis, just comparing the joy in the eyes of these Israeli soldiers who were took captive on October 7th during the military operation, And these prisoners in Palestine, the Palestinian prisoners that spent 20, 30, 40 years in captivity, many of them in solitary confinement, leaving prison with complete, almost a mixture of joy and fear. Again, I was with Samidoun, meeting people from Samidoun back in Brussels, Belgium. This is a prisoner advocacy group. And to see us as Palestinians, knowing that so many Palestinians we have over 10,000 Palestinians in prison camps in 1948 Palestine. Many of them have never been in touch with their family over the term of their captivity. Being able to leave these prisons, and in many cases not even being able to come back to Palestine and being forced into another form of exile, right? Being in prison in 1948 Palestine is a prison sentence, but even getting exiled outside of Palestine is another different form of prison sentence that is given up to them. So there's a lot of, it's inspiring to see them leave prison, but also it breaks my heart to note that there are so many more of them that are in prison and that maybe they will not be able to leave. And many of them are in solitary confinement. So it's a mix of joy and reminds us that as Palestinians, the two most important aspects of Palestinian identity is honoring the prisoners and honoring the martyrs. But yes, these images bring in a mix of joy, happiness, and sadness to see the struggle of the Palestinians. And the fight carries on until every single Palestinian prisoner is freed. Yeah.
So let's see, equally, if not more momentous, the events of yesterday, the return on foot of what was probably hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from the southern part of the Strip up the Netzarim corridor, which was basically Death Alley over the course of this genocide, to northern Gaza. So we're going to show you a clip from a report by Al Jazeera. And I just want to say,
they have waited for this day.
Quite interestingly, yesterday, the day on which these events occurred, what we're about to show you, was the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, the Auschwitz death camp by the Soviet Red Army. So on this very day, the world witnessed the following.
For so very long, forcibly displaced for 15 months, they have lost virtually everything. Tens of thousands now walking north, making their way back to whatever is left of their homes.
We want to see our family. I want to see my mum and dad. We haven't seen them for 15 months. It's a long time. We're going now.
I haven't seen my family for a year and a half. I want to go back and see them. I've been waiting for 3 days to go to my parents. We are tired. I want to go to Gaza. We're not coming back here.
Moments of joy. Despite the hell they have suffered being far from over, they know there is very little to return to. But like a river of people, they carry what few belongings they have left. The buildings, the homes, the businesses that once stood here, now ruins in a destroyed wasteland. In Gaza City, almost nothing remains inhabitable.
Thank you. Could you just go back up a little bit? This is what they're going back to. I can't for the life of me imagine the courage and strength it requires to be happy, to rejoice at returning to this. That's the strength of character that we're talking about here.
In Brussels, I met a gentleman named Abdullah, who is from Gaza, from Khan Yunis. And when I told him we're planning on going to Gaza, what he told me is, you're more than welcome to stay at mine in Khan Yunis. I was like, oh, the Israelis didn't destroy your house. They're like, no, it's destroyed, but you can stay in a tent on my land. So this just shows a bit about how, for Palestinians, the notion of a house is more than the physical construct of what a house is. It's going back to this area that you call home, the land that you belong to, where your roots are tied to. So this is an image of complete destruction, but this is also a symbol of joy, of people coming back to their rightful homes. And in many cases, our homes are also back in 1948 Palestine, which we still keep the key to our houses too. So a lot of these people in Gaza are actually from surrounding areas in 1948 Palestine, whether it's Ashkelon, which we call Al-Mashdal, or some of them from Jaffa. So this is, I mean, I'm going to talk about this later on, but what we see, what some people might see here is destruction, but Palestinians seeing this concept of return, al-awda.
Right.
In Gaza City, almost nothing remains inhabitable. But for the first time since the war began, there is a sense of happiness and hope.
So we can take down the video now. This is a bit long, so we don't need to show the whole thing. And you can find images all over social media, including some, in the interest of time, we're not going to show them, but some children who are reciting en route to northern Gaza, the devastation of northern Gaza, little children reciting revolutionary poetry, as though they're reading from a script, but they're not. It's so emblazoned in their memory that they don't need a script. Really, I'm just speechless. Now, somebody who isn't speechless and probably never has been speechless his entire damn life is Donald Trump. Donald Trump can't seem to keep his damn mouth shut. And a couple of days ago, as I commented in my latest rant of the week over the weekend on Air Force One, began pontificating about what he's going to do with the people of Gaza, northern Gaza in particular. This was before the extraordinary scenes of yesterday. He gave these comments to the media on Air Force One, I think it was 2 days ago. And he said that he was going to ask the King of Jordan and the Egyptian president, both of whom really are dictators for all intents and purposes, to take in 1.5 million Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. As I asked in my rant of the week, what does he intend to do with the other 800,000? Actually, it's not 800,000 now. It was 2.3 million in total, approximately, before the genocide began. Who knows the number of killed? Definitely in excess of 50,000, could be in excess of 200,000. We'll one day have a better sense of the scale of the carnage. But in any event, the number Trump threw out was 1.5 million. Why not, 2 million or more? I don't know. That obviously is a flagrant call to ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip. And in fact, he used the phrase clean out as though this was, like a box of dirty laundry or your toilet bowl. We're going to clean out Gaza. Now, fortunately, but not surprisingly, both autocrats of Egypt and Jordan have responded. And as they have said repeatedly, because it wasn't just Trump who was inclined to try this criminal move, but the Biden administration very early on in the genocide, Antony Blinken, the war criminal, was, openly pontificating about the same thing. And there has never been a point in time when the autocrats of Egypt and Jordan have publicly, at any rate, indicated their willingness to take in any of these people. And they've said flatly, that's not going to happen. If they were insane enough and psychopathic enough to accede to this request from Trump, I think myself, there would likely be an absolute explosion of anger throughout West Asia. That would be a bridge too far for many people. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the former Egyptian president Anwar Sadat, after he did a peace deal with Israel decades ago, was assassinated in open air. And I have every confident that both the King of Jordan and the dictator of Egypt are keenly aware of that history, not to mention that it would be an immense burden. And another thing that would undoubtedly concern them is if they took in these Palestinians from Gaza, no sane person at this stage would think they're going to stop fighting to get their country back. I mean, the level of determination they have is otherworldly. So they would probably be launching attacks on the genocidal entity from Egypt and Jordan. They're not just going to quietly, pass into the night. And that would, of course, cause Israel to attack the territory of Egypt and Jordan and use the attacks emanating from those countries on the territory of Israel as a pretext to send their forces into Egypt and Jordan. So there are plenty of reasons why I believe it's extremely unlikely that either Sisi or Hussein are going to take in any of the Palestinians of the Gaza Strip. And the last thing I want to say is, this was, this too, the return of these tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from southern Gaza to northern Gaza yesterday, and the process is ongoing. They're still moving northward. This blows to bits any claim that Israel has secure control over the northern part of the Gaza Strip and that it can be prepared at some point in the reasonably near future for settlement by the many fanatical Israeli settlers who have been talking about setting up home in stolen land in northern Gaza. What is Israel going to do now? Are they going to send their forces back in again? As we've covered on a previous program, in the last week before the ceasefire, 15 Israeli soldiers were killed in northern Gaza. After we had been told, and many more were wounded, after we had been told repeatedly that northern Gaza had been cleared of resistance fighters. Now you have hundreds of thousands of Palestinians returning there. So I'm not going to make any predictions about whether this genocide is going to resume, but I certainly feel as though in light of these events, the prospect of that happening has gone down considerably. The other thing is that Netanyahu apparently is suffering from quite ill health. Apparently he's had a pacemaker installed and he's being monitored carefully. He may have prostate cancer. There's severe schisms in his family. Apparently there are reports that there was a violent altercation between Netanyahu and his son, who has been hiding out in Miami throughout this genocide while other young Israelis were putting their lives on the line for the genocidal entity. So the arch war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu is in a world of pain. He was actually in court yesterday for his corruption trial. I believe he was pleading with the judge because of his ill health, not to force him to proceed at this time. Personally, everybody says don't count Netanyahu out, never count him out. Well, I'm going to go on a limb here, and I'm counting him out. I think Netanyahu is probably done as a doornail, and I see very little prospect for this man remaining in power much longer, for all of the reasons I've cited, because of the immense dissatisfaction with his rule, because of his corruption, because of his ill health, because of the strategic defeat Israel has suffered. Now, that doesn't mean, if I turn out to be correct about this, that he does depart the scene politically soon. Doesn't mean that he'll be replaced by somebody who's determined to do a genuine peace with the Palestinian people. Hard to see who in the Israeli political elite might be open to that possibility, but it nonetheless would be a welcome, I think, development in the mind of any person of conscience that Netanyahu mercifully ends his political career. Rami, any thoughts about this?
The banner behind the signing ceremony, right, that we saw in Gaza on Sunday, we spoke about what it said in English. It said that Gaza is the graveyard of the Nazi Zionists. So Netanyahu, Yair Lapid, whoever they call moderate and liberal, are different faces of the same evil, which is Zionism. So, and this is one criticism that I have a lot about more liberal movements that are in the pro-Palestine camp, is that they often think that Netanyahu is the problem. Netanyahu is the problem for maybe people that have an issue with corruption, because that seems to be what Israeli courts are indicting him on. But we know that the labor movement in 1948 Palestine has started as much wars, if not more, than the Likud movement. I kind of see it as a good cop, bad cop side of a corrupted movement and a state that is a fascist Nazi state. So yes, I'm very wary of anyone beyond Netanyahu. But again, the people in Gaza know that the enemy is not Netanyahu. The enemy is Zionism and everyone that encompasses with. But also related to Trump, he's talking about how Palestinians have to leave Gaza, but the tides have turned. Now it's about what inspires me of seeing the Palestinians from Gaza who came from the south back home to the north, is that we are now coming closer to imposing our right of return that is guaranteed by UN resolutions. This was Israel's best chance to ethnically cleanse Gaza, to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians, and they failed. They failed in the north. Even when all the Palestinians that you saw that left the north and stayed in the south, there were also many Palestinians that stayed north the whole time. So I think these Zionist leaders need to rethink about what their strategy will be to get rid of us Palestinians, because if they were not able to do so within a genocide, they need to have a different approach. And in some way, that approach, what I expect them is to surrender to the idea that they will never get rid of Palestinians. So they could choose what to do from there, either live in a peaceful one-state solution where Palestinians are compensated and allowed to return, or they're more than welcome to leave Palestine.
Yeah.
And I just want to emphasize that the right of return is the center of the Palestinian cause. And every single Palestinian that you'll ever meet has the key to their homeland, the key to their houses that they were exiled from. And when we've played videos, Dimitri, of Palestinians crossing by foot through the Netzarim corridor back home. And these are the same images, but just switched sides in 1948, when Palestinians were forced at gunpoint to leave their houses by foot into Lebanon, into the West Bank, into Jordan and Egypt. So these images spark a sense of, warms my heart, gives me goosebumps to see the tides are turning, and now we're talking about return, right? Because there's no victory for the Palestinians without return. And these Palestinians are going back to their homes in the north of Gaza, which are the same beaches and pieces of real estate that Jared Kushner and Trump were praising as being great places to open up hotels and beach clubs in Gaza, under these so-called where they were advertising in synagogues in North America and Canada, right? These conferences to sell real estate in Gaza, right? Which there has been heavy protests. So this is a huge blow to the Zionists, to the colonizers. We're going back to our homes and what they've called prime real estate and beach houses and whatnot. And these images resonate as well when we saw the Lebanese people back in 2002 when they were able to liberate the south of Lebanon and come back to their homes, or even in 2024 when the Lebanese people who left their homes south of the Litani River, right, and they all started coming back to their homes, as we've been seeing in the past few weeks. So these images of return are inspiring, to say the very least. And then additionally, as Palestinians, we're also all we grew up often with this image over here of a caricature of a man called Handala, which I have an image of over here. And this little character, as we see his back over here, artist behind Handala, said that the day that Palestinians will return, we will see what his face looks like. And I feel like we're getting closer and closer to getting to see Handala's face. And that would symbolize our victory as Palestinians in our return. Now, and to just finish off by talking about the prisoner swap, back in 2021, I believe, a group of 4 or so Palestinian captives from the Gilboa prison dug a hole with spoons from their prison cell and were able to escape for 3-4 days or so. I don't have the exact dates on hand because this is just from my memory. And the resistance in Gaza promised that every captive, every prisoner who was part of the spoon revolution, right, who dug their way out of exile, of captivity, will be liberated in a prisoner's trade. And this is what we're seeing, is that on Sunday, I believe one of those prisoners who was part of the spoon revolution was part of the prisoner swap. So there's been a lot of these symbolic victories, and it's more than just symbolic victories. There's actual victories that have been appearing over the last days or so. So yes, definitely prisoners, not hostages, of course. So yeah, this is pretty much what I had to say about
Yeah, before we move on to the final subject of the live stream, I just want to add, we're not going to talk about it in any detail here, but I plan to get into this with Laith Marouf, who has been in South Lebanon over the last several days. There's been a similar phenomenon occurring in South Lebanon, where people who live in the southern border villages who have been waiting to come back to their devastated communities near the Israeli border basically started protesting. And because the Israeli forces were supposed to have completely evacuated from southern Lebanon by Sunday, and they decided to stay. And the Americans, who were supposed to be enforcing the ceasefire agreement, allowed them to do it. And the Lebanese army, the National Army, which is supposed to be taking control of South Lebanon, hasn't forced them out. So they just, peacefully, many of them bearing Hezbollah flags, but they were civilians, they weren't armed. They just walked into their villages, drove into their villages, and the Zionist entities' military forces killed 22 of them and wounded dozens of others. But there were also these extraordinary scenes of Lebanese returning to their homes over the weekend, which I'm going to get into in my discussion this week with Laith Marouf.